Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by Ella Massal, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargent. Let's get started.
Have you ever heard someone say you'll bounce back in no time, or it's just the baby blues, everyone gets them? When it comes to the roller coaster of emotions and changes after childbirth, too many of us have been fed anywhere between half-truths and full-blown myths. But the reality is that postpartum well-being is about so much more than losing the pregnancy weight or a quick recovery story. So hello and welcome back to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, where we talk all things parenting, the science behind them, and examine both quantitative and qualitative data. Joining us today is researcher and PhD candidate Talia Ritondo, who is currently based at the University of Ottawa. In 2021, Talia did an MA thesis that focused on postnatal women's experiences of physically active leisure and how gendered expectations of motherhood impact their participation in community team sport following the birth of a child. So welcome to the show, Talia. It's great to have you here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah, me too. But before we jump right in, I'd love to hear more about your background and what sparked your interest in postpartum well-being and how pregnant women or postnatal women get their participation in community team sport affected by their childbirth.
Yeah, so studying this topic was a real passion of mine that started actually in my undergraduate studies. So I really was interested in sort of understanding leisure as just a form of physical activity or for physical activity and leisure essentially together. And then when I was just learning about them, as an undergraduate student does, I found there was actually quite a lot of lacking information surrounding the leisure supports and accommodations for postpartum women specifically. And myself as an athlete, I was raised in a traditionally Italian household where I was encouraged to do sport, but I was also encouraged to have children. And I really wanted to become a high level athlete. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to juggle this? Like, I've been taught that you cannot do both. And I feel like social discourses and language surrounding the two really say you cannot do both at the same time. So I really started to interrogate those things in my undergraduate research. And then that led me into my what you named as my master's research as a team athlete myself. I really wanted to understand how people just don't go back and do yoga, right? Like, I'm not interested in yoga, I'm interested in volleyball. So there are a lot of nuances there that I explored, and it ended up being a really fun and fun project. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting origin story. What would you say is the biggest misconception that you found through your research about postpartum well-being?
Yeah. So there are so many misconceptions just in society in general surrounding being a postpartum woman or person. And really, a huge idea is the idea of what I talk about in my research is the idea of intensive mothering or intensive parenting, which is that once you become a parent or a mother, 100% of your focus has to now go to your child. So that's your focus surrounding time, resources, your bodily autonomy, your money, everything must be dedicated to the success of your child. And where does that leave you as a person, right? So that's a huge misconception, especially if you want to engage in physical activity and take time for yourself to do things or take time to be with friends and community. There's an automatic tension there, right? So that's a really big misconception. And another one is that and I sort of mentioned this briefly, is that the only physical activity you could do is yoga when you just have it, after you give birth. And that's just not the case anymore. So, yeah, it's a fun world to be exploring.
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested in learning more about your thoughts on, how women can actively participate in sport while through their postpartum journey. But before we do that and dive further into detail, I would love to get to know you better as well. So this is Have You Met Talia? And this is going to be a rapid fire style icebreaker. So please answer these. Well, I'll say a word and you let me know what comes to mind within just a few words, if possible. The first one here is book.
The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar
Movie.
Wilde. Arrival by Denis Villeneuve.
Ooh. Podcasts.
Ologies with Ali Ward.
And I have no idea what you just said. Oh wait, ologies. Ologies with Ali Ward.
Ologies.
I'm sorry, I totally heard I don't know why, but I heard something completely foreign initially. And no, but Ologies by Ali Ward is definitely one of the first few podcasts I ever listened to. And it's wonderful. I love it. Role model?
Undergraduate, master's, and PhD thesis supervisors. So Shannon, Dawn, Audrey, Francis, and Francine, and Shannon.
My follow-up question was going to be if that was all one person.
No.
Yeah. And what about a course or class that you've taken that stuck with you to this date?
Yeah, my undergraduate qualitative methods class just opened my eyes to the world I'm in now.
That's such a researcher answer. Yeah, my qualitative methods class. That was the most formidable class that I've taken in my life. My last question is, what is the most important lesson that you've learned from all of these?
Yeah, really that collaboration and learning with others and from others is the best way to create social change and to create personal growth. So I really believe in the power of collaboration.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you for sharing all of that with us. It's been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit better just for a little bit of time. But now I think it would be a really good time to move on to our topic for the day, which is postpartum well-being. But before we get into that, I would love to define some key terms. So this is the parenting podcast, and lots of people have different views on what parenting is or could be. So why don't you share your definition of parenting with us?
Yeah, so parenting to me is an umbrella term, and there are lots of different types of parenting that fall under parenting. But the umbrella term of parenting is uh, raising a child. I know it's very simple, but because I think there are so many different paths to parenting that are underneath that, and I would say a really key author that dives into those different ways of parenting and specifically mothering is Andrea O'Reilly. I would highly recommend people check out her work. She's just fantastic, and she wrote she's done really important research on different approaches to motherhood and parenting, which is why my answer is so simple, because it's so complicated.
Yeah, 100%. And how would you define postpartum well-being? What are the different core factors that influence a mother's postpartum health?
Yeah, so postpartum health again is a sort of a web of ways of being healthy for yourself and for others around you. And what I think is interesting is that oftentimes when people think of postpartum well-being, they think of being healthy for your baby. But I also think an important thing is being healthy for yourself in a way that's comfortable for yourself as a postpartum person is key to that. So that can look like it's it's complicated because it's not. I sort of reject the bounce back narrative because I think that's impossible for most people and just an unrealistic societal expectation. So really, it's meeting yourself where you're at in the postpartum period, and wanting to be comfortable in the postpartum period. And I think that's postpartum well-being. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not like your weight pre-baby or whatever, like rejection of that concept.
Yeah. So, what does a more realistic postpartum journey look like?
Hmm. That's an interesting, that's a really interesting question, because it is so different for every single person who experiences a postpartum journey. Um, it really stems from not only the experience you had during your birth and what that meant for your body during your birth, but also the types of supports you have postpartum and who is surrounding you postpartum. So the journey can be so different for everyone. And medically, they'll separate it by like a 6 week period. So medically, you give birth, 6 weeks later, we check up. I mean, this is from a Canadian context. You have birth, 6 weeks later, we check up, and then you start your postpartum period essentially. And then it's just like the healing process of your body and living your life as a mother or person afterwards. And yeah, because I cannot nail it down to one specific way of doing things, if that's fair to say.
Yeah, of course. But I'm really curious to know, like, what does it mean to like meet yourself where you are? How does a mother like figure out what the best way, to take care of their health is, for their own self?
Yeah, yeah. So probably the key advice that people can give is to listen to your body, and to not set unrealistic expectations of healing for yourself, or really comparing your healing journey or your journey to another person's journey. Again, because everyone's very different. And I think the medical standard comes from like a generalized approach to how people heal. But we have to remember that if we're looking at, generalizations, there's so many people outside of that that fall outside of a generalization. So really attuning to your own body, attuning to where you are, and really having grace for your healing period and having grace for returning to whatever you'd like to do, whether that's sport, work, social life, all of the above. Is not feeling guilty for not meeting certain expectations, really.
Yeah, for sure. And what do you think is the importance of talking about how what the more realistic notion of postpartum like recovery would be? What have you found to be like major problems in how women perceive their ideal postpartum like journey to supposedly be? Um, what how does it affect them in a negative way to like hold expectations that they themselves probably don't even want to reach?
Hmm. So within that, I think holding yourself to those high expectations that you may not be able to reach could contribute to things like postpartum depression. There is a study, I can't remember who it's by, but I will plug this book by Lucy Jones. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to show books.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Okay, great. There's this great book by Lucy Jones that really talks about, like, it's called matrescence. So becoming a mother, essentially. So the way we think of adolescence, but matrescence, so motherhood, right? And she's her perspective is really interesting because she essentially wrote this book about her experience giving birth for the first, second, and third time, as a scientific journalist. So she was able to sort of corroborate her experience with scientific literature and be like, yeah, this is spot on, or not at all for me, right? So I think, and she in that book really talks about how things like expectations surrounding breastfeeding, and women who say can't necessarily breastfeed will contribute to postpartum depression. Expectations surrounding how you feel you should be raising your baby versus how people say you should be raising your baby versus the things you hear online and in the online sphere or whatever. will also contribute to postpartum depression. So really a lot of the mental health aspect postpartum is a very tedious space to navigate. And the second you feel those like the guilt, the tensions, the oh my gosh, what am I doing, the doubt, that's when you can be at greater risk for postpartum depression. Some people are already at risk for it because of their comportement. How do you say that in English? Their
I'm
way
not
of being.
sure. I don't know how to understand French.
Sorry, they're just way of being. Their
Right.
pre
Yeah.
diagnoses of depression, essentially,
Mhm. Mhm.
and anxiety or whatever. So some people are at higher risk with that, but then on top of this, can really add to people's risks of experiencing that in the postpartum.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I kind of always like coming from a background of like someone who has been diagnosed with like anxiety and depression before, and like it's always like lived in my head as like a woman, like if I were to give birth I'd probably have to go through that like postpartum depression period, which I certainly don't want to go through. But I never really thought about the flip side of like other women who may not be expecting it and then end up having it, and going through that for the first time. um like I really can't imagine. It's like comparing apples and oranges, of course, but like have like going through that depressive state for the first time when you're in postpartum sounds to me like probably worse than like going through it a second time, but I don't know, like it's definitely individual for sure. And yeah, and I've also seen like people online, y- the internet's a wonderful resource, but like there's also a lot of like comparing, right? There's a lot of social comparison, and apart from that, I think like the internet's just like probably exacerbated the effects of like taking general public health advice and then like comparing yourself to that and being like, oh, my baby's not there yet at the whatever like developmental milestone that they're meant to be at. That all these sources say like these are the developmental milestones and they're not there yet. There's something really, really wrong with my baby and I'm doing everything wrong, right? So I'm really curious to know, like, what are some ways in which mothers or parents can kind of not dissuade, kind of like soothe themselves, like ease their qualms in this area. I feel like it's a very prominent part of the postpartum journey.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think one of the biggest risk factors as well surrounding, we can say, postpartum depression and also just not feeling good. Post pregnancy and childbirth is social isolation. So social isolation is a huge, huge factor that has been shown to really, again, increase those risks and just make people feel not great after having children. So really, I think connecting with community is so, so, so important, and connecting with the community that works for you, right? So maybe some people will not want to see their parents because, again, they're afraid of facing judgment or something. Like they don't have a great relationship with their parents. That's fine. If you have close friends that you want to connect with, who are like family, I think that's key and amazing. Or if you want to connect, this was reflected in my master's research. If you actually want to connect with your sports team, that was actually really helpful for some women as well. So they left, say, like their hockey team to go give birth, and then just being part of like the team pictures and like, or just being on the WhatsApp with their team through their postpartum journey really helped them feel still like themselves, or in a certain way. So I think that was another really key piece, is just being really close with, staying connected with the community that works for you. I think is really important, and then also staying connected with other parents. So again, that like social isolation piece is true for others as well. So going to parenting groups, Sometimes going to support groups, like if you're having trouble breastfeeding, there's like breastfeeding support groups that people can go to, or just postpartum groups, or like even C-section groups. Like, like there are so many support groups for so many people. So those are other really good ways to connect with community, to feel supported and not feel alone, which I think is really, really key. And then, of course, I'm going to plug doing a physical activity that you want to do as another way to feel like yourself. And I know that can be a very big challenge for many people. But there are so many interesting ways to connect with that physical activity, like I mentioned, uh, talking with your team, or even just like being connected on social media and stuff like that. So finding alternatives if you can't return physically, to still remain connected with something you're passionate about.
Yeah, I wanted to ask this. You mentioned this at the start of the episode about how there's kind of a misconception that postnatal women have to stick to yoga or like lighter forms of exercise. So, yeah, let's address that. Like, what is the misconception there? What do women think that they would struggle with when they think, or I need to just go for yoga and that's the only thing that I can do. And, what are the alternatives? What are some other sports or like physical activities that women can actually consider?
Yeah. So I'm going to tread lightly with this question because I don't want to give medical advice to people returning to sport. It is important to consult with your healthcare professionals, of course, when you're doing this. I will say there is really new and really great research coming out of the University of Alberta, with Margie Davenport's team, who are understanding elite athletes who return to sport postpartum and what their bodies are capable of. And it's been found that I'm this is not like verbatim quotes here, but it's been found that people who've done high performance physical activity pre-pregnancy and during pregnancy, because that was another part of another study that they've conducted, you can continue certain forms of like weightlifting and running during pregnancy. That's still relatively heavy loads, of course, based on how you feel, etc. Um, and then you can continue that in the postpartum period as well. Of course, again, based on your healing progress, based on the kind of birth you had, etc. But there is this big misconception that a person's physical activity journey has to be very, very, very gentle and light and very um, delicate for like years postpartum, we can say. When really some people feel good enough to return 6 weeks postpartum to their sport. Some people feel good enough to return only 6 months postpartum to their sport. So again, it's really keeping in tune with your body, but that's not to say it's not impossible, right? Um, but again, please listen to your body. Please listen to the healthcare professionals, um, who are knowledgeable about this stuff too. That's another thing. Healthcare professionals aren't always quite knowledgeable about the type of physical activity that people can do postpartum. Um, Oftentimes, people will feel they're prescribed light walks, and that's all. And sometimes that's not enough for people. Sometimes they want to go harder, and sometimes that's too much for people, and they're like, I cannot move. So it's really listening to your body process, and then maybe even seeking advice from others who've experienced, or who are in the same sport as you. For example, if there's some really interesting research on rock climbers returning to that sport postpartum, and how they'll share stories about how they feel, things like routes they can try, things they can try. And they'll like share in those experiences together and kind of work through it together, which is really cool. So, yeah, there are different ways. What I'm saying is there's different ways, and you don't have to be just like still for 2 years.
Yeah. Could you give us some examples of like what we could potentially suggest to our GP? Because I'm the type of person, like when I go to the GP, I kind of blank out. And then afterwards, I'm like, hang on, I should have asked this too. But like when I'm in the room, my entire mind is like blank and I'll have to prepare in advance. So like, yeah. And you're right. GPs usually will, or like whoever you're seeing, usually they will say like, oh, it's something general, right? Unless you ask a more specific question. So could you give us some examples of like what exercises we could ask the GP or the pediatrician, like, oh wait, not pediatrician, wait, you're
I know
checking
your
for yourself. No,
OBGYN. Yeah.
yes, your OBGYN. Yes, could you give us some examples of like what types of exercises we could ask them? Like, hey, is this suitable for me or not? Yeah.
So you can talk to them about the sport you did, like contextualize it, right? So talk to them about the sport you did before you're pregnant, during, whether or not you did any physical activity, and then how you're feeling after you give birth, and sort of work through them with that. And if you ask a general question, they could give you a general answer, like they could give you a specific answer. But potentially, if you ask a specific question, like, what do you think about me weightlifting? What do you think about me running? And stuff like that, then they may be able to target their answers a bit more specifically to you. I will say, though, this can or may not work with your GP, depending on who they are, where they are. There's so many contextual factors about how they may respond. Yeah. But I will say working with not just GPs is another way to approach it. So working with pelvic floor physiotherapists is another strategy that that postpartum women have used and have found great success in. Especially because it's really the pelvic floor the abs, the whole core section that takes a big brunt of what's going on when you're pregnant and when you give birth. So they have a lot of really interesting approaches to returning to being physically active in so many ways. And I realize that could be a barrier for some people, especially financially, because maybe insurance will cover it, maybe it won't, depending on which country you're in, et cetera. But there's also some really great online resources surrounding pelvic floor health and physiotherapy, say on YouTube, on Instagram, with a lot of people that share their wisdom there. So that's kind of my plug for take care of your pelvic floor and look into that.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I never really thought of that. And I reckon like other people probably haven't as well. But what do you think are some other aspects of postpartum well-being that you believe should be discussed more?
Yeah. I think another big piece is identity that people don't talk about, or maybe it's not discussed in like popular media, but I feel like there is a narrative, at least going around in the qualitative research world, and in the book I referenced and stuff, surrounding just like a massive shift in feeling in you feeling your identity change, not necessarily losing who you are. Some people may experience that, but others have described it as like a shift, really. Um, and just like you becoming a we in a different way. But also not losing the you within that is really important. So there's a lot of, kind of like I mentioned, that intensive parenting discourse that really focuses on the birth, like the success essentially of your child. But the postpartum journey and like the postpartum identity really is your success and the child's success together. So not losing the you in that is super, super important. And I think that's also part of why I really advocate for engaging in physical activity that works for you if you're a physically active person to begin with. But really in any leisure, coming from the leisure background of mine, any leisure, whether that's like gardening or reading or embroidery, like of any form, not losing that part of yourself, because it's something that you did before you had children. It doesn't mean necessarily that's something you have to stop when you have children. It may look different. And that's very, very, very normal. But remember that that's a part of you. So yeah.
Yeah, and I also imagine like the part where you're using your hands to touch the things that you used to do before you before you gave birth, before the postpartum period, that can really help to get back to feeling like in the identity as well. So essentially, like, okay, what advice do you have for people whose pastime is playing video games? Because, like, not that I'm thinking about getting pregnant anytime soon, but like, when I imagine myself like in the postpartum period, because that's what I do with like all the episodes on the podcast. I just imagine like what
Yeah.
like, you know, I imagine I'm the subject, and then I like think what I want to know. And I just imagine like I be wanting to play video games the whole time, but I don't think that's good for me. Like, I'm not gonna get any sunlight. I'm not gonna go outside. So what advice do you have for that?
That's so funny because I'm also a huge gamer. So I understand where you're coming from, where you could just spend like 12 hours on the couch
Yeah.
and be perfectly fine with it when it's not fine
Yeah.
for your body.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, and this is coming from a person who really likes routine, uh, try and create a routine, but we'll say tentative routine because, again, the postpartum period can be so all over the place. Um, but you know, if you're a game based person, maybe doing like game based achievements, like, oh, I get an hour of gaming because I went outside for 10 minutes. You know, like I like to gamify my life in that way.
Yeah.
I know it's kind of cheesy, but it works for some people. Some people use like the calendar sticker method where they'll like, this is my PhD supervisor, Audrey Giles, gave me this tip where, you know, you have a calendar and you put a sticker a day for every time you go outside. And then when your whole calendar is like filled for a month, you get like a prize or whatever.
I
And it
love
could be like really,
prizes.
right? And it could be like really cute stickers, like cat stickers or something.
Mhm.
And so you're excited about it. And then your prize is, I don't know, a new game, or like you get to like buy some DLC or something, or downloadable content. Like, you know, like gamifying, if you're a gamer, gamifying it because it's fun to make life a video game in that way. And then, of course, if you're not a gamer, you know, creating systems like that that can work for you that are also flexible because of the bananas that is the postpartum period.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that tip. That was really helpful. If I ever find myself somehow in the postpartum journey, I will pick that tip up. Um, my next question for you is, you know, we have been talking about community and support and how that's really important for the postpartum journey as well. So I'm curious to know I'm flipping it around, asking for the people who have someone in their life who's in the postpartum journey. What can partners or like families or friends do to recognize when a parent is struggling the postpartum period, or recognize when they need support, especially if they're masking it pretty well?
Yeah. So I think checking in with people is really important. Not waiting for them to text you or like talk to you unless they set a very clear boundary where they're like, don't talk to me. And you're like, I get it. Um, but yeah, checking in just with like a text or like a little something, I think is really important. Even if they're comfortable with having visitors, just doing like uh, not like a surprise drop by, but like a, hey, I'd like to come over. Can I come? Like just showing them that you still value them. Uh, I mean, of course, in your brain, you may value, like, of course, you're going to think of valuing them, but really showing them in ways like that you know, they'll feel appreciated, I think is really important. Whether that's like for us, my partner and I really like to cook for people. So that's our thing. Well, like my friends who are, I'm at the age now where a lot of my friends are having children. So we'll like join the meal trains and cook for them and bring them frozen food or food they can have like throughout the week and stuff, and really be there for them in that capacity until they feel a bit more ready to like hang out. And then again, just checking in and really see, even just showing you want to be with them, like showing you care, you know? I think that's a really important thing, again, because of that isolation piece.
Yeah, I really like the idea of cooking for somebody who needs the food so much because I feel like, and this is something that I've witnessed some of my friends who have had like baby showers and have like received gifts for their new baby and whatnot. And a lot of the time they get things that they don't actually need, they don't plan on using, or they've already got one for themselves, but the food bit is something that like they would definitely like they need to eat, you know, at some point. If they're not making food for themselves, they're going to be taking out, or they're going to be getting delivery, something like that. And food can always be frozen. I mean, like obviously check if they need it first, because you don't want to like show up with a whole like freaking truck of food and then their
Yeah.
fridge is stocked and they have nowhere to put it, right? But
Right.
yeah, it is such like an easy, well, depending, like maybe you're not that good at cooking, but that's not point. Yeah, it's an easy, like reasonable, like meaningful thing to do for someone, that also like just fulfills the basic needs. So that's a really nice thought. And thank you for
Can I add
sharing
one
that.
more thing? I'm
Yeah,
so
yeah, of
sorry.
course. Yeah.
And some people don't like when you cook for them, which is also totally fine too. But even offering to go over and clean can be
Oh,
huge
yes.
as well.
Yes. I love doing that. I love doing that for
Mhm,
people because
mhm.
sometimes, like, when they're in that spot, it can be so hard to even like just get up and do a small basic thing. Whereas you, a able-bodied person, can do it in like 2 seconds, and your like mental health is not affected by it, then why not do it? Like even, and this doesn't have to be limited to postpartum women as well. Like if you have a friend who's struggling, helping to clean up just a little bit, guilt-free, shame-free, like it means the
Judgment free.
world. Yeah,
Yeah.
judgment-free, 100%. I really believe that too. um yeah, so thank you for sharing that. My last question for you for this particular segment is, what do you think soon-to-be parents should expect in regards to postpartum well-being?
Yeah. So I read this question, and the first thing that came to my mind was expect the unexpected, which is like feels like a slogan for a car company or something. But like it's so true that it's so hard to anticipate what's going to happen because so many things can just go right and so many things can go either wrong or just not according to your expectations, or the plan that's going to happen. So really expect for things to be surprises. And I know not many people will be happy with that answer, because people like concrete responses. But the idea, just it's been proven and discussed time and time again that things really just do get flipped upside down, or flipped upside down, or just unanticipated things are there. So be like, that's fine. Be ready to be surprised and know that that's okay. And also know that, you know, people are going to do great. People are going to make mistakes, for themselves and or for child rearing, and that's okay too. Um, but yeah, I think it's really important to I think it's really important for postpartum well-being to be prepared to be unprepared, if that makes sense. Because so much of the shame and the guilt comes from not meeting social expectations that either we place on ourselves or that others have placed on that others place on people. So by being ready to like not always meet those expectations or have things shift that causes not meeting those expectations potentially can help mitigate these things. I'm saying this without having experienced pregnancy. Disclosure. So it's easy to say for me. It's probably super, super hard to do, when you're in it, obviously. But I think, a lot of people go in being like, oh, nothing's going to change. And then they're like hit by the truck of change. Right. So that's why I always want to frame being like, that's why I always want to frame being ready for the postpartum is being ready for a roller coaster of a journey and trying to hold on essentially while you're doing it.
No, yeah, for sure. Because I envision like, when I first, so I don't have any experience being pregnant either. Just FYI disclaimer here. So
Yeah,
also
yeah.
also no idea like how difficult it actually is. But when I first got my cat, this is related. I promise. When I first got my cat, it felt really weird, and I had so many nightmares of me throwing him outside of the window. Kind of stemmed from this anxiety that I wouldn't be a good enough mom to my cat. So I just imagined that like mm, the experience of like birthing a child, and that with the child, with the actual human child that you actually birth, is like tenfold, right? And then on top of that, the developmental milestones part, you kind of got to be ready for the fact that like you're not only going into like this journey where you're probably going to be unprepared for half the things that come your way, but also just consistent change, constant change. Like, you're in a blink of an eye, your kid is going to be three years old, and now you have a new set of problems. And then next blink of an eye, you have to find an elementary school or primary school, and that's another set of problems. So, like, yeah, that is definitely something like to think about for sure. Um, but yeah, I think now would be a great time, since we're on the topic of like just general pregnancy and postpartum well-being. I think it would be a really good time to answer some questions from the internet. And this is where I'll pick a few questions from the netizens of the world. I'll pose them to you, our expert, for your insight and advice. So the first question that I have here is, what can I do to keep myself entertained and feeling useful during postpartum? I'm 3 days into postpartum, and I'm soaking up my new son, scouring over names and watching everything on Netflix, enjoying every moment I get to be with my baby. But boy, am I bored. I want to be productive while at home, clean the kitchen, make big batches of food, and create things, but I know better than to push myself too hard. So, what are some things that I can do to keep myself entertained and still feel useful?
Yeah. So the practical side of my brain says look to things that you find meaningful, I think is really important. So the productive comment is very interesting. So some people find productivity just like a really important part of their life, whereas some people find like create, like this person also said, like creating things is an important part of their life. So doing like things in little batches that are meaningful to you, I think, is really important. Oftentimes we want to categorize activity and leisure as like accomplishing stuff, and being like, I must do this activity and this activity. It's like, well, uh, instead of like categorizing things by activity, categorize things by what means a lot to you. So maybe it's like writing thank you cards, which I know is like kind of like a surface level thing. But maybe if, like I said, if a person really connected with like embroidery, um, before they had children, that's like a little thing that people can pick up. If people are like myself, volleyball enthusiasts, and they can't go out and play, um, potentially watching some games on YouTube, or like reconnecting with stuff that was meaningful to you pre pregnancy, can really be a good way to feel that, like, oh, I'm doing something cool.
Yeah. My next question here is, how do you maintain mental health postpartum when you can't exercise or leave the house? I'm 6 weeks postpartum, and I've barely been able to leave the house since my baby was born due to a slew of complications during delivery. I tried going for a slow stroller walk, but my stitches got really sore and my bleeding increased. How can I maintain a sliver of my mental health without exercising?
Yeah. So that's when I would recommend the consultation with a pelvic floor physio, uh, if a person has the means to do so. Um, that can work for many people, for feeling like they can at least get some sort of even physio exercises that are super, super, super lightweight, super not too intensive, that can still feel like you're being physically active in some way. And then, like I said, reconnecting or connecting with your favorite physical activity or sport in other ways. Um, I'm not going to rename the ways of doing that, but yeah, just finding other ways to be in tune with your physical activity self, because um, it can still make you feel like yourself even if you're not doing the sport.
Yeah. My next question, I actually wanted to check how much of the relationship aspect of the postpartum journey have you interacted with in your research?
Like partnership, essentially,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
family and partnership.
yeah, kind of, or like domestic partner, like baby daddy,
Mm.
like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that kind of thing, like their role in it.
Yeah, so I was an RA on a really cool project with Dr. Coris Bean and Dr. Iris Lesser, um, between my master's and PhD, and we sort of examined the importance of partner support when experiencing physical activity during the postpartum period. So, how important partner support is to be able to return in a capacity that works for you, and it's so critical. Like, people who don't have partner support, we've found really, really struggled with re-engagement, whether that's practically re-engaging, like having time to access it or the means to access it, or even just feeling like they were allowed, quote, to re-engage, like they allowed themselves or their partner allowed them to, which is a whole thing, but um, feeling like they were allowed to re-engage in physical activity was really critical. And like support from the partner is just so, so, so key. Like I cannot emphasize how important it is, which is really interesting when you look at the experiences of single parents, and really trying to find. That was an experience of one of the people I worked with in my master's degree. She had a baby as a single mom, like it was her decision, and really her sister and mother were her support, and they kind of like took on the role of a partner during that time. So really, it's just so important to have some form of close support that you can rely on, to be able to be physically active, to be able to just survive in a way that works for you. And I know, and I say this again, knowing that not everyone can do that. But it's just been shown to be so critical.
Yeah. Yeah, I asked that because our next question is somewhat related to partnership. Um, and well, it's more just about like whether they're overestimating the time that they actually need to raise the child. But anyway, here's the question. Is postpartum really that bad? I'm due soon and I'll be getting 4 months paid time off while my husband will be quitting his job to be a stay at home dad. I keep reading the baby sleep 18 hours a day, but also that we won't have 15 minutes to ourselves to take showers and we won't be getting any sleep. But that's just not adding up. Even if my husband and I split everything 50-50, it sounds very doable. Am I failing to account for something?
That's a super interesting question, because I feel like there are like almost like three social discourses and like competing discourses woven into this response, which is just illustrative, not to single this person out, it's just illustrative of how many different messages to the postpartum period that we get socially. Like hearing that babies sleep 18 hours a day, but you're going to be super busy. And then you want to aim for the 50 split, but will it actually work? We don't know. And I think the postpartum period, like, it's just a very intense period of change. And people are not always prepared for that. And some people breeze through it. Like it's such, but I will say more often than not, they will not breeze through it. Breeze through it. It's a very intense, intense period. So that being said, again, it's the going in with the expectation that stuff is going to shift. Things may feel super doable at the beginning, say for the first 8 weeks, whatever, 3 months, and then all of a sudden your baby will stop sleeping or forget how to sleep or sleep only during the day and stop sleeping at night. or maybe your baby has to go to, like, this person has, well, their partner will be a stay-at-home dad, but maybe your baby has to go to daycare, and then they'll be getting cold after cold after cold, right? So things are always going to be shifting, so be prepared for that shift. And then when things are going well, like chill, like things are going well, okay, great, like take advantage of that time, because they won't always go well.
Yeah, and I also imagine because infants when they're infants, inf- infants are pretty vulnerable as well to sicknesses, and if they get it on the like harsher spectrum, it could be life threatening. And so every little cold or every little rash or like whatever what have you condition that they get as a mom or a parent, like more likely than not, you're going to have a little panic, especially if you're doing it for the first time and you have no idea like what to expect. You again expect the unexpected, right? Like not to like put panic in you, but yeah, like you have to kind of be, well, you don't have to if you don't want to, but like being prepared for all the outcomes is kind of how a lot of us cope with life. It's just like trying to foresee what's like what the roads are that we might have to go down, right? So I think that's probably part of the whole like I'm so tired and fatigued all the time and I don't get enough rest. It's like looking up like what does my baby have, like what do I do for this particular thing, right? um
And there's
yeah.
also like um sometimes people want to like feel like, they are prepared in some ways, and a good way also is just to have your resources ready too. So this person says, I'm due soon. So maybe part of their nesting period or their period of getting ready for the baby is like creating lists of resources that they can call when there is like infant distress, and being ready to know which spaces they can take their child to, if they are if their infant has a cold or an ear infection or something scary. So that could be, I know in Canada, essentially, we have obviously well, I don't know if it's obviously, but we have 911, which is like the emergencies. But then we also have 811 in Quebec, which is a like helpline where you can be consulted by a nurse on the phone, and they can tell you whether or not you should go in for an emergency, make an appointment with your doctor, etc. So having sort of those resources ready, I think can help people feel more prepared for those scarier circumstances. But again, not a doctor. Consult with your doctor on how to do that, please.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for answering those questions. It's been really enlightening to me, at least. So, I think now let's go into the practices and habits segment. And this is where we'll talk about more of the day to day application of what you've shared with us. So, the first question I have for you is what are some habits or exercises that new parents can do to regularly support their mother's postpartum well being?
Yeah, yeah. So whether that's like there's for the self and then there's for the community surrounding them, right? So moms for themselves can take really time to check in with themselves, whether that's while while they're doing childcare, while a partner, someone else is doing childcare. But really check in on how they're doing, explore the possibilities, like, am I feeling a bit down? Do I need external support, and stuff like that? Or am I happy with how I'm feeling? Am I happy? Do I need to be more physically active? Do I need to take it easier? Just again, those like physical check ins and mental well being check ins are really important. And then for people outside of the person who gave birth, um, it can be important to either I wouldn't say remind them because that could be condescending, but just talking about, being there, again, being there for them and offering, just making sure that the person feels like they can take time for themselves, right? So whether that's taking on the primary caregiver role for, as much or as little as they can, and really helping the person feel like this, the life of the child isn't only on their shoulders, because that can feel like a huge, huge burden, um, or responsibility. I shouldn't say burden, responsibility, which is very important. And yeah, so really just being there for that person, and giving them the support they need in the moment they need it, whether that's, again, taking on the child so the person can have a shower or go for a jog or take a nap or just do something that they want to do outside of childcare, or child rearing can be really important, I think.
Yeah. And what do you think are some common challenges or struggles that postnatal mothers run into when they try on the day to day to take care of their well being and to be just slightly active, make sure that everything is smooth running. What do you think are some struggles that they face in the day to day of it, whether it's like asking for help or something like that?
So there's so many, so many. Um, you kind of mentioned it. Sometimes just asking for help is a struggle. There can be guilt associated with that. Absolutely. Feeling like you can't ask anyone for help can be a huge thing. Or feeling guilty for asking someone for help can be seen as a weakness or just something difficult to do. Um, there's also just another challenge can be articulating like what you need at that moment, especially if you're exhausted, sleep deprived, just feeling all sorts of feelings, right? It can be really hard to identify the support you need, which is totally understandable. And yeah, and then of course, there's the barrier of guilt that a lot of people feel in general. Um, there's a great article. Who's it by? I want to say Carrie McGannon. Um, she really explored is it like the concept that they need to feel like a person needs to feel like they've cared for their child first before attending to their own physical activity needs, right? So again, trying to find that balance between, I feel like I'm doing a good job of my expectations of motherhood or parenthood by caring for this child, but also I need to care for myself too. And really finding that balance is so, so, so hard. And there's so many challenges just within that, that a lot of people face. So it's a very layered sort of problem. Um, but again, I think with things with elements like community and support, um, those are really big ways that people can help survive and get through those difficulties, and really be able to connect with themselves.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. It's been a pleasure to talk with you about this topic, and I've learned just a great deal of information that I probably will never get to use, but hopefully other people out there will be able to use this information. It sounds really helpful. And I really appreciate you spending your time with us today. So I think now would be a good time to go into the open mic segment. And this will be your chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about. And it doesn't have to be related to the topic. You can use this as a plug. You can use this to yap. You can use this to really do whatever that you wish to do with it. And if you have any links or anything, we'll leave them in the show notes later. So yeah, take it away.
I appreciate that. Okay. So I want to just uh, post face this conversation, we talked a lot about sort of like immediate solutions surrounding the parent, the caregivers, the support surrounding them, etc. So like what the person and their community can do to survive this time and to even flourish and experience well-being within this time. But I think in order for that to happen, bigger social change has to occur. So it's not just these acts of kindness and these acts of support and these acts of personal well-being, but really changes uh, to policy. that need to occur so that people can feel supported, either within, being able to take time off from their work for like a bigger parental or maternity leave. Um, Policy supports that support the return of postpartum people to physical activity. Actually, Australia does an amazing job at their sport institute of illustrating how women can return to sport postpartum at the elite and community level. Unfortunately, that still needs to be developed here in Canada, and it's being slowly developed in the United States and in other places across the globe. So I think that systemic support is very important. Um, and also changes in the medical field surrounding the discourse of caring for the self postpartum needs to happen as well. Discourse still heavily skews towards the well being of the child. I will say, understandably so. However, the mother is still a person, or the parent who gave birth is still a person. And there needs to be more discourse and social support for them within systems. Again, I'm saying this from a Canadian context. I don't quite know the Australian context. Um, but there are already countries that are doing it successfully, like France, where people have more than one consultation postpartum just to see if their stitches are healing, and that's it. Right. So I really think that like more support for postpartum women is absolutely necessary at these levels. And also just in the sport field in general, accepting that both identities of mother and or parent, childbirthing parent, and athlete can coexist within a person successfully. A lot of times people will phrase that one is compromised over the other, but we've seen success stories of people crushing it after coming back from childbirth. So, really, I think that their voices need to be shared and heard. And we need to change, again, policy to support their experiences. And then that's where I'm going to put my plug of so I co-founded a great well, my opinion, great, but an organization here in Canada called Momentum, with amazing women who are elite athletes, and many of them are elite athletes who are parents as well. And they're really central to this organization, and we're trying to support elite athletes returning to sport after giving birth. And if we stay afloat for like we just co-founded a few months ago, so if we stay afloat and continue to grow an organization, I really want to bring the support to community athletes as well, and athlete and just physical activityers of all levels who need support postpartum with engagement. So I really think that this movement is an important movement. And yeah, the discourse needs to change surrounding who can participate in physical activity, and the fact that this is just essential to postpartum well-being. So, and to motherhood well-being and to parenthood well-being. So I think that's my open mic.
Yeah, that was an excellent use of the open mic. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. We'll leave that in the show notes. Sounds like a very valiant effort at helping people just return to what they dreamed of doing in the first place. And yeah, I wish you all the success. I also agree with everything you said with the systemic support. I've talked to doctors who have agreed that the medical field and the psychiatry field kind of work pretty disjointedly, and that's just not how human bodies function, and there needs to be a little bit more of an integrative system there where medical doctors are also able trained to assess and diagnose, at least on some level, the psychiatry aspect of it, because I think as a society, a lot of us visit our medical doctors more often than psychiatrists if you don't have any mental conditions. And some things can be pretty clear as day, but you don't have the authority to assess or diagnose anything. And yeah, so it's just a whole soup to think about right now. And if anyone out there is, has the authority to change things, we put our hope in your hands. So thank you very much, Talia, for joining us today. If our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
So they can go to my LinkedIn profile. That's kind of where I stay up to date professionally, and just keep all my ducks in a row on there. They can also check out Momentum's Instagram page and website. That's kind of my big project right now with them. So that's an important place to check out sort of the progress there. And we share a lot of Canadian research and international research on postpartum return to sport, pregnancy, sport engagement, and just parenting and sport engagement. So I think we're a fun page to follow. And then also, I don't know if you want to keep up to date on my publications. I have a Google Scholar account that lists them all. So
yeah, perfect. We'll link those in the show notes. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you once again, Talia, for spending your time with us, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by the Parenting Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so that we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargent. Thanks for tuning in.